All right, so what are we talking about today? Well, we're talking about a couple things. The first, as you can see, is this paper called Can Variational Quantum Algorithms Demonstrate Quantum Advantage? Time Really Matters. So the first section of this video will just be going through this paper very briefly. And the second part of the video will sort of be discussing, I guess, some more meta comments about the channel and really where things are going from here. Maybe I'll put a timestamp in that. But to begin with, let's talk about this paper. This is sort of mentioned. I remember mentioning this at one or two of my videos. I think I recommend the next era of quantum computing video, and it's 11 months ago, the next era of quantum computing, the end of NISQ and the beginning of a new phase, and also in the what's it called? Quantum machine learning, what's it good for anyway video. Both of those I bring up this idea that I realized, I was doing the math a while ago, that if you just write down the numbers for these algorithms, like, VQE, right? You just look at the number of terms in this Hamiltonian, you write that down, you write down the number of shots you need, or you write down the time it takes to do a shot. You're like, wait, this is intractable. Like back of the envelope calculations based on parameter shift rule differentiations show that this is very difficult to work with because, as you scale up, you scale linearly with parameters, which is super painful. And usually sometimes your depth or parameters scale linearly with qubits, but not always. And additionally, you also have complexity of expectation values that increase. So there's a lot of things going on here. In this paper, they basically just formalize some of these ideas of back of the envelope calculations that I've mentioned in a bunch of previous videos. So obviously we're looking at this VQA setup, which we've talked a lot about. We all know how to train one by now. And they look at a specific UCCD ansatz, which we're not going to talk about. We're just looking at the hardware efficient ansatz for simplicity, right? This is the standard, hardware efficient ansatz. And so, how do we do gradients, right? Okay, we know how to do gradients. I have videos on parameter shift rules before. So how do we compute the total time? Well, it's the time needed to take one sample of our expectation value, and then it's the number of samples required, right? Often we have to do 1,000 shots. The number of gradients we have to do for a single iteration, basically, like this would scale in our case linearly with parameters, and then the number of iterations to do for the total number of optimization routines. And you can see that each one of these can vary in how it scales, but importantly, even if we assume reasonable scaling, things will quickly get out of hand, as we can see. In HEA, which is all we're really going to be considering, we can see that this number of terms grows linearly with the number of blocks we have, right? If you just have more blocks, it goes linearly, and with the number of qubits, right? For every single additional qubit we add another parameter. So it grows with respect to both depth and width, which is very intuitive. In order to compute the time, right, to sample, we need to consider all sorts of initialization, readout error or readout times, and gate times. Initialization and readout times are usually, heuristically, I just write them as 0. You can see here they're 1 microsecond or something, but because these are constant, right? Usually readout and initialization you do simultaneously across all qubits. So it's oftentimes a flat fee that you pay. But then what matters then is the single and double or two qubit gates. They take superconducting, which are the fastest gates that I know of, at least currently available, are superconducting qubits by many orders of magnitude over something like ion traps. Important to note too that this speedups will decrease when we have fault-tolerant quantum computing, because that will be slower because you're incurring an error correcting cost. So this is like ion traps are already 3 orders of magnitude. Add another couple orders of magnitude for error correction, and then you're at like the true fault tolerant zone. Now you might say, okay, well, we can actually gain back the benefit of fault tolerance if we can converge faster, which is true, but I don't know how true that is in practice. So they assume very fast superconducting unerror corrected gates, which is sort of the fastest we can do. Then we don't have to worry about all this stuff about UCCD. What goes on here, right, is we're saying, okay, let's suppose like the number of iterations go from 100 to 10,000, and then we have varying numbers of samples required. And so this NSI, which they list somewhere up here, is just the number of samples times the number of iterations. If we go back to this figure, we can see that the however many samples we have to do per circuit is it varies depending on the level of accuracy we would want. And so we're taking this number and sample times n iterate, and that's NSI. And I would say these are high, right? I would include 10 to the third if I were them, but you can see if I just plotted it, it would be just right below this. So let's look at HEA, because UCCD is whatever. If we look at this, we can see that this is for depth, right? P here is the depth. We can assume for a linearly scaling depth and for a quadratically scaling depth what the total cost estimate is. And they have this handy marker here for 1,000 years and 1 year. So anything above this, I guess anything really above the above the blue line is going to be like not feasible. And you can see very quickly that anything, this is NSI 10 to the 8th. So if we do 1,000 shots and 10,000 iterations, did I do that math right? No, 1,000 shots and 100,000 iterations, right? 10 to the 5th, yeah, it's 100,000. Then what we have is this set of green lines right here, and we can see that on this left figure at about 28 qubits, there's a crossover point for a year, and that's huge. So at 27 qubits, which we can trivially simulate on a laptop, well, maybe not on a laptop, on a single GPU, on a single small GPU, it's pretty trivial to simulate 27 qubits. We're already at a year of variational algorithms. So that's not ideal. And what this is indicating is that these QML algorithms, right, like normally you have iterations of optimization and you have the cost per iteration, and that's what matters. But now we're saying, okay, we have the iterations, and then we also have to generate samples for a given expectation value. Then we also have an expectation value that has many terms in it, potentially. For example, for a VQE could have hundreds or thousands of terms. And then we also have to update it, which takes linearly scaling gradient parameters. All of this adds up to add a lot of time. And the important thing to note here is a lot of people might say, well, what about SPSA or these other O of 1 scaling optimizers? One that only cuts away, that cuts an order of n from this. You can see this is a logarithmic scale, so this will still be growing quite quickly, even with an order of n subtracted from it. But also, these optimizers such as SPSA show a lot of strength in low qubit regimes, but I'm not sure if I've seen often the problem with these approximations is that they often fail in higher dimensional spaces. So if I have 433 qubits and tens of thousands of parameters, I'm not sure SPSA is going to really perform that well, is what I'm trying to say. So when we do write classical simulations, we can see that the average gate time obviously is much higher because, it's we're doing digital computation, but we can still do this very quickly over many CPUs or many GPUs. So as we can see, this is really quite a difficult problem that we have for ourselves of how to even apply, even at pretty reasonable qubit counts, pretty small. I suspect you're going to need at least 100 qubits to do anything super interesting, but I could be wrong. But even at these small qubit counts, you're kind of stuck. I mean, this is not a great outlook. And this is what I've suggested, and I don't know if I actually wrote any math. I feel like in one of my previous videos I did about like, well, if we actually do these calculations, what does it look like? And it's not great, to say the least. Especially since these are non-fault tolerant times, right? The superconducting qubits that we're operating on are not fault tolerant. So you have to add a slowdown for fault tolerance. But of course we can't, a perfect fault tolerant quantum computer, we could keep running one set of operations for a year and keep that state alive. That is not at all true. No quantum computer, I don't think, will ever be able to do that in the rest of time, perhaps. Maybe, you get superconducting coherence times of minutes or hours. That would be an innovation of a Nobel Prize worthy amount, but years is insane. And so we can't, even everything else aside, even if we could just be like, okay, we'll just run it for a year, whatever, we can't even run it for a year because this is not an error corrected system. So there's a lot of issues that come up. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about was sort of the, I guess, the future of the channel, shall we say, and a few meta points. So I first want to remark that this has grown a lot more than I sort of expected. I uploaded videos for some conferences and some background on things I was learning about. It's since grown to, as of this video, when I upload this one, it'll be 109 videos. I'm not sure if all of them are equally viewed, but in total, there's now 500 subscribers and almost 30,000 total views, which is a lot more than I was expecting because I did not particularly advertise this channel, in part because, as you can see if you watch any of these videos, they're not really scripted. I don't edit them. I don't really do multiple takes. Well, sometimes I do, but usually not. And so they're not exactly, the pinnacle of scientific communication, shall we say. They're kind of a grad student grunge aesthetic is maybe how I'll phrase it. And so I didn't really advertise them anywhere, but somehow, naturally, thanks to some algorithm somewhere in YouTube, it's gone pretty well for what is an extremely, QML to medium to advanced QML is a very small field. So all that's to say that you might have noticed a decrease in QML content. Originally I was reliably uploading TFQ content onto regular. That has not really been the case for, many months now, maybe even a year. And in part, that's because TFQ is in a not great state as a library. It's not really being actively maintained. And so, dedicating more of my time to a repository or to a library that's sort of fading away in the sense that it's not being actively maintained. There's no official support as far as I can tell. No one responds to any of the issues except to me. Like it's not a very alive community or a very alive repository, and so I hadn't felt a great interest to keep using it. Even though I say that as a contributor and as a co-author of the white paper. And so that's why it saddened me a lot to see it this way. But I mean, looking at it, I don't think it's been, I think February of last year. So it's been more than, it's like almost 2 years now. I mean, maybe, I don't remember exactly. So all that's to say, there was a decrease in TFQ content, and with that, a decrease in general QML content. And part of that was simply because I'd made a lot of QML content. There's hundreds of hours of QML content on this YouTube channel, and really I made a lot of what I wanted to make, and there's definitely more videos I could make. There's more I sort of have written out or coded up, but I don't think I'll really be making a ton of quantum videos in the future. Maybe some, but not as many as I made maybe a year ago. And so that's, I mean, that's, I guess, obvious, right? If you see my upload history from the past year, that's a sort of an obvious statement. I've uploaded, like, let me see, 2 or 3 QML videos that are actually like the standard coding style videos. Some of their commentary videos I've uploaded. And so what happens now? And I don't intend to sort of cease production of content, but I'm thinking of trying out more ML focused content. I've been thinking about ML more recently, and I've been more excited by it. QML sort of has, I've gotten a bit disillusioned, as you might be able to tell recently, but going back, I saw some videos recently from other YouTubers who put a lot more effort into their content. There was a video of this guy who trained an RL agent to play Pokemon. I don't play Pokemon, but it was still interesting. And another one that played some racing kart game at a superhuman capacity. And that those are really fun things, and I like that style. And so I wanted to try maybe more reinforcement learning content. That's what I originally started. I think my first video is actually about, well, it's the hybridization of reinforcement learning and quantum computing. But I like reinforcement learning, and I might start trying out some videos on that. I have ideas for pedagogical explanations of RL. And trust me, it's not just going to be another vague DQN intro. Like, there's so many, I swear there's so many tutorials on DQN out there, but more in-depth and more practical and at a higher level, more code-based, sort of basically what I was doing with the quantum computing content, but just for reinforcement learning or machine learning content instead. Now, that's not set in stone at all. I might totally change my mind after this video and go right back into TFQ content, but that's just sort of what I'm thinking, just to give a general update. Since I realize, I mean, I don't know what what obligation I have, but there is at least enough, combined views that I feel like I should clarify what the current position is and what the current status is. And now I'm just really rambling. So TLDR is less and less QML content, potentially more and more ML and reinforcement learning content. I was thinking, I have some videos I want to try that are like high quality, like actually scripting and animating and stuff like that. So I might make a few grunge videos in the meantime, but maybe, I don't know, maybe sometime early next year I'll try for a really high quality, or a somewhat high quality video. Okay, I'm still just rambling. I need to stop. So TLDR, less QML, more RL, maybe not committing to anything. And yeah, also wanted to talk about this paper because I had this tab open. Okay, I'm actually just stopping the video.